so we have a, thank you for that. We have a guest tonight. We're going to talk about LAFCO, Executive Officer Keene Simonds.
Simonds.
Sorry,
That's
Simonds.
fine. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Board. As mentioned, my name is Keene Simonds. I am the relatively new Executive Officer for Marin LAFCO, or Local Agency Formation Commission, the friendly planning arm of the California legislature. There's one in every county. And LAFCOs are tasked, among other things, with overseeing the formation and development, if you will, of cities and special districts. Okay. And I come from Marin now just about 6 months ago. I was previously in Napa County and previous to that Los Angeles. So one of the tasks that my bosses have, and I have 11 of them. Okay, I've got 3 county supervisors, 3 city council members, 3 district members, and 2 public members, was to get out, meet the districts in particular, and talk a little bit about some of our upcoming programs and activities, and in particular for this board's benefit, some of the activities that I think directly affect Marinwood, and perhaps even indirectly have some interest to this board. And I'll start off by noting I did get to meet with Tom a couple weeks ago and had a great conversation, and he certainly was very helpful in orienting me towards the world of Marinwood. Again, all of this is relatively new to me, and one thing that I have learned from Tom, and more importantly from some of my other bosses, is this is an engaged community, so I appreciate that there's a lot of interest in the core of LAFCO's mission, which is to be in the business of promoting smart, efficient, and accountable governmental services. And one of the emphasis that Marin LAFCO is taking a look at is our planning responsibilities, okay? And just very briefly, all LAFCOs are tasked with creating and then updating as needed what we call spheres of influence for every city and special district in California. And a sphere is essentially our version, or the legislature's version, of an urban growth boundary line. And in many ways, they are the gatekeepers to all future growth, as well as service provision within that particular area. And so, going forward, the legislature tells us, hey, LAFCOs, every 5 years or so, you need to be in the business of updating the spheres of influence. And in order to do so, you need to prepare studies that independently look at each agency within your jurisdiction's ability to provide the service that they are formed to provide, as well as the ability to meet what we perceive as any future capacity or needs within the community. So with this in mind, Thursday I'm going to my commission with a proposed study schedule that outlines our activities over the next 5 years. And I have a copy of it that I'm going to leave with the board, and I apologize, I only made a handful of copies. But all of our documents are available on our website. That targets looking at what I refer to as kind of the north-central 101 corridor, which includes Marinwood, San Rafael, and a handful of other special districts in calendar year 2015. This is going to be LAFCO's attempt, okay, to look at the range of governmental services provided in this area, your district, San Rafael, and a handful of other special districts again, and understand what is the capacity as we speak today to provide certain services, and then what is the nexus between the demand going forward, likely over the next 10 years. And so one of the questions or issues that will be on our radar, and I think it's fair to put on your radar as we go forward, is, is the Marinwood CSD a service area reflective of community needs? Should there be any changes to the sphere in terms of accommodating future changes, whether it be annexations or even detachments? Is the district organized in a manner that makes sense? For example, right now, and this is my working understanding, you are authorized to provide 3 or 4 specific services: fire protection, parks and rec, street lighting, and I believe open space. CSDs have a lot of authority. However, in order to provide any other service, you have to go through a LAFCO process, and there are certain factors that LAFCO has to look at. That naturally be a question that we will have for our own benefit, and certainly as we start inching towards that 2015 study, it's something I would certainly encourage this board and staff to consider. Are there issues that you see that merit essentially a free review by LAFCO to consider either boundary changes in the future or, again, organizational structure issues? I know for a baseline issue, one of the things we're going to be looking at, because we've been asked to by San Rafael Sanitary, is looking at a different way of delivering wastewater services in this region. Right now you have about 3 or 4 collection agencies that all feed into Central Marin Sewer Authority. I think it's a fair question for us to ask, would it make sense to take those 4 and make them into one? So right off the bat, that will be a priority of ours to look at. But again, I do want to encourage this board and staff to work with us up front, and if there are issues we can at least put some free analysis towards, we'd be happy to do so. I'm going to stop there. I appreciate this is really just an opportunity for me to get in front of the board and say hi and introduce myself. If there were any questions you have or just comments that I can convey on to my commission, I'd be happy to do so. And if not, I'm also then just going to stick around and just check out my first Marinwood CSD meeting. So no pressure if there's no questions.
Do you have any examples of specifically with fire departments, given our fire component, and also for Park and Rec, of how things might change or might have changed in an equivalent kind of a situation related to what LAFCO would do? I'll give you one primer. For example, when there was previous discussion about the development of George Lucas, the properties for the ranch, it was reported to us a number of times through our LAFCO representative that would sort of automatically assign under a sphere of influence. So that was kind of like on the horizon, and that didn't happen. Are there any other kinds of examples like that where it's not related to specifically development changes?
Yeah, well, and I have a copy of the map, and again, my terminology is still a work in progress, but it's interesting. So there are 2 large areas within your existing sphere of influence that are not in your physical boundary. And so that suggests that LAFCO is saying out loud, when the time comes for these areas to be developed, we think that you are the appropriate service provider, with the caveat that the timing still has to be considered. And of course, the big area, which I believe was added in 2002, is the Silvera area, which, as I understand, was taken out of San Rafael at the same time and placed into your sphere. So it was the commission saying, hey, powers to be, if this area is to be developed, and I guess at the time there was a plan for 500 so many homes, we think it should remain under the county's jurisdiction, and it should be served by Marinwood in terms of fire and the other services provided. The other area is the sliver. You may know better than me. In fact, I bet the firefighter would know, right here.
That's County Farm.
County Farm. Okay, so those are the only 2 living examples right now of your existing sphere suggesting growth is appropriate. Without knowing the obvious answer, I look at this map and I say, as a newbie, why isn't this area in your sphere? It seems to be, and the last suggests maybe there's an answer that you know of. But these are things that, in terms of potential changes to your sphere, we'll at least look at, because part of the sphere discussion is not only should there be expansions, but also should there be reductions. Now, as for the question about fire protection, I don't actually know of too many CSDs that are uniquely set up as Marinwood that are in the specific business providing fire protection and then Parks and Rec as their main service components. For example, in Los Angeles and Napa, CSDs are typically the governmental vehicle that are used to either freeze in time an existing unincorporated community that has no development potential whatsoever, or the opposite, where it's a developing area and it's a placeholder for incorporation. You kind of fall in that kind of a gray area. You have some development opportunity, but you don't necessarily have the non-residential development that suggests incorporation is in the future.
And recreation, you know, for example, I don't, you know, right now, San Rafael has its own rec department that serves officially its, you know, residents, but a good portion of its residents on the northern side of San Rafael are users of our services, and we have paid, you know, use of a good portion of our services. But is there any financial boundary thing that would have to do with that?
No, and recreational services generally are predicated on lost economies of scale, because in a place like this where you have nice park facilities, you're going to be drawing customers essentially that have no nexus to your jurisdictional boundary per se. How other park and recreation districts do it, you know, generally they're a little larger in scope, and then, you know, the other vehicle, of course, is whatever user fees one can extract. I will say this, being relatively new to the area, I will say that I haven't seen a special district with this extensive listing of recreation programs, so that catches my eye in a very positive way.
Thank you. Do we have
yeah, just two quick questions. One, the powers that you spoke about, do you have a list of what those are that we
I could certainly provide it. In short, a CSD, a Community Service District, operates under Government Code 61000 and essentially can provide any municipal service that's out there, so long as it gets LAFCO approval, with one notable exception. A CSD cannot provide direct land use control. A CSD can fund the operation of a municipal planning advisory council, which in many places is essentially a local planning commission, but a CSD can do just about anything but that direct land use authority.
Another quick question. The additional portion that you were talking about that might be annexed to us, do we as a board get to agree with annexations, or is it basically LAFCO determines it and then?
It's an interesting process that has evolved even in the 11 years I've been in LAFCO. So essentially, a district, unlike a city, has limited authority to stop an annexation that has been initiated by landowners or residents unless they can produce documentation within a certain time period, I believe within 30 days of being given notice by LAFCO, that there would be a clear financial hardship on that entity. That threshold would be pretty high though to meet, unless it's a big project and clearly say, hey, 1,000 homes is going to create a problem for us.
Well, that's why the city was able to get out of it, but you're saying it would be more difficult for the CSD if they chose to do that? The San Rafael backed out of it, right?
Well, San Rafael, as I understood, there was no annexation per se. They had a development project in the works that was going to lead up, and maybe I'm off, lead up to eventually requesting annexation, and then there was a 180 turn and said, forget the project, and we want this out of our sphere of influence.
It was in their sphere of influence,
Yeah.
and then they kicked it out.
The sphere of influence has no protest proceedings per se, so if LAFCO adds it to a city or a special district, that's the final decision. In fact, one of the unique functions of LAFCO is, unlike you and your regulatory features with respect to fire and building code compliance, we're quasi-legislative, so we don't make findings per se. We make determinations. So the only way to reverse a LAFCO decision is either through a formal protest proceeding where the residents, and this happened in southern Marin when we attempted to consolidate 4 sewer districts, said we don't want it. Okay, that's a way to overturn a LAFCO decision. Or you go through the courts.
The assignment came with the taxation revenue related to it, did it not? In
What's
terms of coverage, well, for example, I think, well, let's say for, not to use the Silvera property, but the ranch property, that because we were going to be providing fire services, that therefore we would collect.
Yeah, once it's annexed, to us, we
Once
get
it's
to tax it
annexed,
as Marin proper, so we'll get the money.
Yeah, sphere of influence just means maybe, sort of, kind of, someday. Annexation means you're married.
Yeah, you get it. You get
Well
it.
said.
I just wanted to make, I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't coming.
Annexations.
I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't coming without any
No,
revenue
that's where it
source.
brings the money.
Whether the revenue was enough was another question. Quick question. One other brief thing is, sorry.
Oh, I was just wondering, LAFCO, are you joined with Sacramento? Are you
We are
California
a
government?
political
agency?
subdivision of the state of California.
Political subdivision.
And our authority is rested in legislation.
What I was going to ask is when a services district, if a services district sort of abdicates or wants to abdicate a authority or with something within the charter, there's a process for that, right? It can't just one day.
Oh, yes. So
My understanding was that it had to be, that LAFCO had to be involved in terms of assigning them to someone versus the district just sort of washing its hands of the issue.
Yeah. So just because I know that there may be note takers here, if you look at 56.812, the government code section, there is a whole section dedicated to the concept of how does a special district go about asking for the approval to provide what we call latent powers, which in your case could be anything other than what you already do. Or, and this is important because this becomes an issue, especially for our brethren in Central Valley, when special districts, because it's a money loser, want to get out of providing the service they've already provided. You can't just say, forget it, we're not doing it. You have to go through a LAFCO process, and the commission ultimately has to say yes or no. And importantly, and most of the time, whether we ever say yes or no, we usually do it with terms. And those terms can range from certain conveyance of liabilities or assets, or hinge on an election to establish a new funding stream. So there are layers.
I have one more point to make. We have 3 very new members of the board who are learning this, and I know there's a lot to learn. If, say, Marinwood were to go to LAFCO and go through the process to add one of the now latent powers to our services that we provide, that's a separate issue. We also have to go to the voters and get a 2/3 approval for any special taxes that we want to fund it with, correct?
Correct.
Or you have to give up, someone who's providing that service now has to give up some
funding.
of their funding for that and give it to us.
Correct. So
Which isn't going to happen.
and another special
Funding
district or
doesn't
the county
automatically come.
benevolently would have to hand over a portion of their property tax receipts.
How much luck with that?
Well, I appreciate, thank you for the, I mean, it's very helpful, and I'm sure we'll be engaged. I'm sorry, yes.
I think I spoke to you on the phone about a letter
Oh, yes, very good.
about the one with the Board of Supervisors, and at that time, I thought you indicated to me that when it comes to the CSD, if it involved a new annexation, that the CSD still retained the ability, even with the approval of that letter from the Board of Supervisors, to negotiate when it comes to that annexation in terms of the revenues and such as that.
Yeah, so Ray had mentioned, so a few weeks ago, one of the very first things I did when I came here was I realized there was not a master property tax agreement between the county of Marin and special districts, which for my purposes as just the LAFCO EO proved challenging, because anytime we process an annexation request, that may be the most nominal jurisdictional change that you could think of. You know, taking a public right-of-way and putting it into a city so that we avoid encroachment permit issues with the county. We still have to get a property tax agreement in place before LAFCO can take action. And this applies to cities or special districts. The county has adopted, on all special districts' behalf, a master tax agreement, I believe on February 27th, that creates a template that says, unless the district or the county request otherwise, LAFCO, you can go ahead and proceed with the jurisdictional change with the knowledge that a new exchange has been agreed upon. And so what that does for us is allows the nominal projects to go forward without any headaches, and a big project still has the ability for District A to say, whoa, 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 we want a portion of your property tax if we're going to take on these new demands. So it doesn't, you don't lose, Ray, that ability to negotiate on your own behalf.
I'm a little confused. I'd like to understand the lineage of responsibilities. Because when I first talked to you this evening, you said, I have 11 bosses, 3, okay. But your power comes from the legislature, so you're actually reporting to them, correct, or no?
No, we administer state law that has been delegated by the legislature, right? So the legislature inherently maintains the authority to oversee city and special district boundaries. They chose in 1963 to create LAFCOs in every county to administer that on their behalf, and in doing so, they provided full autonomy to a composition that includes members of the Board of Supervisors, members of the local city councils, and members of special districts, who then appoint on their own members of the general public. So LAFCO, I report to these 11 bosses who are just responsible for administering state law. But we don't directly report to them, although they could certainly say, you're not doing a good job, as they have in the past, and said, you need to now do this, or you're going to now be doing that.
Okay, so so there's 11 members, and they get, your agenda is, you know, your priorities and whatever that you're doing here, is it established by you or by them, or how does that work?
So the commission has a strategic plan, a copy of which is on our website. That creates an annual to-do list for staff and direction. And then as the executive officer, they give me a certain budget, and I then allocate the resources as I see fit to meet that strategic plan.
Which supervisors are on your...
If it's like we're 20 minutes past and LAFCO is something that we're going to continue to talk about, there's a lot of...
Just last question. Which supervisors?
Judy Arnold, Susan Adams, and Kate Sears.
Okay. And I'm sure...
The study that you're embarking on, will you, if we don't request anything for you to study for Marinwood, will you?
Oh, we'll still study it.
Okay, and then will you tell us what you're studying?
Oh, we'll come and tell you what we're studying. But that, you know, denotes the importance that if there's an issue and you want to frame that issue before we frame it perhaps in a way that just doesn't seem right relative to local conditions, you have that opportunity. So thank you so much, and I look forward to coming back.